What if we can positively impact society by reshaping the mindsets of young men? And while we're at it, let me ask you, what does it mean to be a man? My name is Dennis Meralda, a father, a teacher, a coach, a mentor, and a principal with over 2 decades of experience shaping the minds and characters of young men across the United States. If these questions resonate, if you're a young man looking to improve your life or a parent looking for tools to help your son become the best version of himself, the Building Men podcast was created for you. What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Building Men podcast. Welcome back. If you've been here for other episodes, as always, I'm your host, Dennis Meralda, joined today by former guest on the show. He and I have been in touch for the last 3 years, definitely 3 years, but he hasn't been on the show since September 14th of 2021. So if you get an opportunity, go back and listen to that episode. Our guest today is none other than the world famous Marc Picard. What's up, dude?
Hey, how are you, Dennis? Thank you for having me.
Awesome.
It's
Absolutely.
weird because I'm involved in the production of your podcast, so you're always on my computer as a file. so,
Right.
so I'm used to stop you when you speak. For those that don't know, at home, I'm producing this podcast. I
Yes.
help them with the branding and all that, but it's so funny. Every time I jump on a call with a host, I always have this reflex of like, oh, that was a good thing that he
Right.
said. Like, I'm gonna
Stop it.
pause it, and you're like, no shit, it's live. No.
Oh, that's so funny, dude. And
Yeah,
it's,
yeah.
I definitely want to take the opportunity to publicly thank you for all of everything that you've done for Building Men since the time that I met you. We joke about it, when you basically were the one that rebranded everything with Building Men with the logo, with how it comes across, with adding the color pink in. And you told me 3 years ago, listen to me and I won't steer you wrong. Add in the color pink, do this, do that. You need to talk a little bit more provocatively about certain subjects. And it's all worked. It's a lot of the things, it's like slow is smooth, smooth is fast. You need
Mhm.
to just believe in it, put in the time and effort. So you've done that. You built the website, you produced the podcast. You are so intimately involved in everything Building Men. I couldn't be where I am without you by my side. So I wanted to take the opportunity to just tell you how much I appreciate it. To those listeners, if you don't follow along with Marc, please do give him some love. I just really, really appreciate everything, man. I love you. I appreciate it. Definitely.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, thank you. And I can say the same for you because branding is that tricky thing where gut feeling is very important. If you don't have the right gut feeling in front of a brand or in front of a product or whatever, then you're screwed. And when I remember my first touch point with your brand, it was all man-ish and brick walls and constructors
It's
and
like
all
the
that. But
village
but
people.
I yeah, yeah, but yes, absolutely. And after that, there was all the hand from with different colors, like
Yes.
so. You were talking about toxic masculinity, but with a very man-ish branding. You know what I mean? Whereas when we flip the colors a little bit, because what we say is pink is not for men anymore, and pink is not for women anymore, and blue is not for men anymore. And it's not like I redesign everything. We
Right.
change the color palette. We develop a sort of more appropriate vibe, and that made his way inside of you because you design a bunch of things. They were more in tune with what you wanted to say. So subconsciously, you were designing better because you had the right color palette now that served what you were talking about. It gives you better tools as a content creator. And that's sort of the whole idea of the branding thing. It's not just sending a logo to someone, it's clarifying what the hell they're doing. Oh, and by the way, here's the logo that
Right.
represents that, you know?
It's
So that's what
it's
we did.
it's taking a concept, and that's what we did. We talked about what is the message you're trying to share with the public here. Tell me a little bit about yourself. And after our first conversation, it was at the end of that first podcast on September 14th, that was when the episode came out. We spent another 20 minutes on the Zoom call, and you gave me some pieces of advice, and then it's don't look back since then. So it really has made all the difference. And for me, I didn't know my ass from my elbow at the time. I had no idea
Yeah.
about marketing, about branding, about anything social media wise. You were just so I learned by watching what you were doing, and I started to dial into how I wanted to get my message out there. So again, really, really appreciate it. And I'd love to know, it's been a while. I mean, you and I have had constant conversations over the last 3 years, but for the sake of the audience, give us a little bit of information about what's been going on in your life, a couple highlights, some lowlights if you're
All right.
interested. To learn more about our programs, including one-on-one mentorship coaching, the Foundation, our Building Men online group community for young men, or to bring a Building Men experience to your school, check out our website, buildingmen.io, or click the links in the bio. Now, back to the show.
And yeah, man. Hey, okay, all right. Let's go down to it. Let's go down to
Let's
what's
jump in.
really going on in my life.
Yeah.
All right.
Talk to
The
us.
podcast, the business, blah blah blah. All right, all is good. But now we need to talk. Okay?
Yeah, let's dive in.
So
Here we go.
I have twins. All right.
Mhm.
Last time we spoke, they were 8, right? Something
Right.
like that. Maybe, I don't know. That was a few years ago. Now they're 11 and they're becoming teenagers. Okay. So this is my discovery. And now I'm talking to you because you're a teacher,
Yeah.
you're a school principal, like that's your thing. No, teenagers, your thing. So, dude, do you know what I'm discovering? It's beautiful because at that age, in the same day, you can talk about the fact that Santa Claus doesn't really exist and what's Pornhub. In the same day, you will have I remember that day actually. We talked about Santa in the morning, and later at night, they came to me and they're like, "What's porn, Dad?" You know, and I was like, "What a powerful age where like childhood and
Yep.
teenager merge." What a powerful age where little boys are not necessarily at the same place than little girls, also because of porn, right? It's so accessible. It's so and porn is made for male. It's not made. Most of porn is made for male, not for female. So it's a time, it's a phase of my life where I'm. We talk a lot in our family. The communication is open, but how do you talk about porn to your 11 years old? You know what I mean? There's no freaking instruction manual for this. And you gotta talk about it because it's part of our society. It's everywhere. It's in our subconscious mind. It's in our conscious mind. It's just there. Most of research on Google are porn related. When you think about that, we made an obsession. It's reshaped our whole sexuality. You know, fascinating to me. So that's a new challenge
Okay.
that I wanted to sort of pick your brain on a
So
little bit.
let's go down that rabbit hole during this episode today. Let's catch up in that capacity. So I'd love to know then, when your daughters ask you about Santa Claus and Pornhub, as a parent, I remember having the conversation with my son, and coincidentally enough, the first conversation I needed to have was with my daughter, my youngest, she'll be 14, when she was like 6, right? She had an iPad, or we had a family iPad, 6 or 7 years old. And the search history was naked women, naked boobs, and boobs. Like that was, and I thought it was my son, who was like 11 or 12 years old at the time. And he's like, Dad, it wasn't me. And then I went to my middle one. I'm like, Jules, was this you? No. And then all of a sudden, my little one, who's a little white girl, she had very pale, beet red. It's like, Sophia? Was it you? Yeah, it was Sophia looking up boobs, and naked women. And so we had to have I started that conversation right then and there, but then it was a conversation with me and all of the children. And then obviously it was a little bit different. I talked to my son about it, but I'd love to hear from you. What was the initial reaction you had when your twins asked you about that?
Okay. So first we need to put the people in context. We come from a
Okay.
very open-minded family. That's the first thing you need to
Yeah.
be aware of. Um, uh, I, uh, I was with my wife 15 years in an open relationship. Okay, so dialogue is that if you want to be in an open relationship, if you want to be in a healthy open relationship, dialogue and communication is the key. There's no way you're going to survive if you don't first talk to yourself by yourself with you alone and then talk to the other. So the communication in our family is something very natural. There's no taboo in my family. So the first thing I said when they talked about it, I said, "Hey, thank you for trusting me
Mm-hmm.
to talk about that, because there's nothing wrong about porn when you think about it. Okay, it's the use that we make from porn that is complicated, right? So, but the first thing I did is I acknowledged the fact that they went to me to talk about that, and I cheered that. I was like, that's super cool. Yeah, absolutely. The way I explain it for 10, 11 years old brain, because that's tricky. You can explain what's porn to the teenager that is
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more developed, but at that age, it's tricky. I simply explain to them, in movies when they do stunts and they fight, they don't fight for real. Porn is the same thing. Those are actors. Okay. I didn't go into detail because it's not always the case, but I want their brain to process it. I said, those are actors. They do sexual stunts, So it's fake. They don't love themselves for real. They create images that is supposed to create pleasure to the people that is watching it. Now there's a whole other industry to porn, and a whole other dark side to porn, which is human trafficking, objectification, and all that. Um, so I had to dip my toe into prostitution as well with them and talk about that as well. They were aware because we live in Spain, so the word puta is like they say it everything. La puta cosa, la puta no sé qué, la puta ta ta ta. So they know what a puta is, a prostitute. Um, but but yeah, that's how I explain it. I did not want to create a taboo, because if they have my genetic, if they're forbidden to do something, they're gonna do it
Mm-hmm.
about 100 times more. You know, so that's how I tackle it. But I think most of people deal with communication issues at home. You know, so there's a lot of you that are listening to this episode. I know maybe the communication at home is not that fluid, because then we're entering in a debate. How do you answer that in front of your wife as a man? There's a lot of couple porn is a taboo, huh?
Mm-hmm.
The woman doesn't know the guy is watching porn, and he's
Absolutely.
watching porn 3 times a day, jerking off in the
Absolutely.
bathroom. You
Yes.
know, and if she knows that, she will take this as cheating, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Which we're not into what's right or wrong here, but the communication on porn is not there in the couple between the parents. So therefore, how do you want to talk about it with your son if you don't even talk about it with your wife?
And
So
if you're doing it yourself, if it's something that the values that you have around it, you want to share with your son, and you're not living up to those values, or if you're saying this is bad, you should not be doing it, if that's your stance, yet you are in the bathroom 3 times a day, masturbating to porn, that's an issue. And
it is.
we'll go down a separate episode potentially just about the open relationship. I'd love to talk to you about that idea and
Yeah.
relationship dynamics, but let's keep going with the porn thing, because I need to compliment you about the way that you handled that with your daughters. I'm sure you weren't ready for that conversation at the moment. You weren't, as 11-year-old girls, you probably weren't ready for it, but you handled it like, hey, thank you for trusting me. That's a huge deal as a parent, to validate their curiosity. And I say to parents all the time, if your child is asking the question, they're ready for the answer. The way that
Yes.
you answer it will be tailored to their developmental age, the environment, things like that. But you need to be ready. You can't say, well, we're not talking about this right now.
Yeah.
And then the other piece is to make sure that you and your partner are dialed into the message that you're sharing with your child. So if you're listening to this and you have a child who is double digit in age, start thinking about how you're going to have that conversation, because they've already heard about it, they know about it, they're curious
Absolutely.
about it. And unless you're the one that's talking to them about it, they're getting their information from kids on the school bus or the schoolyard or from Pornhub itself. And
Yeah.
Pornhub right now, I did some research on this. Pornhub is the fourth most visited website. The fourth most visited. It goes
Wow.
Google number one, YouTube number two, Facebook number three, Pornhub number four. Number four most visited website. Another fun fact,
Wow.
Playboy was started in 1953.
Yeah.
Hugh Hefner started Playboy in 1953, right? And so there was a whole morality thing around a magazine that would show naked women or partially naked women.
Yeah.
In 1953, there were 54,000 subscriptions to Playboy in the world, right? 1950. So
Okay.
this is going back 70 years ago now. Today, right now, every single minute, there are 80,000 visits to Pornhub. Just Pornhub, 80,000 visits
And
every
that's
single
just
minute,
Pornhub.
just Pornhub. And you would have to spend 83 years if you went and searched 12 hours a day for every single porn site. You'd have to spend 83 years of your life to visit every single one of them. So just by comparison's sake, how accessible it is. And if you're a parent, if you think your kid is not seeing it or hearing about it, you have to take your head out of the sand right now. 41% of teenagers say that on a regular basis, they're seeing nudity in school. So they can access the school's Wi-Fi, and in some way, shape, or form, they're able to circumvent the Wi-Fi that they have, the security controls in a school.
Yeah.
41% of teens, boys and girls, say that they, on a regular basis, they can view nudity or sexual acts in a school environment.
Yeah.
Let that sink in if you're a parent. So not only it's it at home or they're, get the magazine and go into the bathroom in school while you're paying taxes for your kids to go to school, they're accessing pornography. The conversation has to start now with you as a parent. So
Absolutely.
when you pause this episode, go talk to your kids about it or get on the same page with your significant other and then talk to your kids about it. If you're a young man listening to this, start the conversation with your parents. You might need to lead the way and say, hey, let's talk about this. I just heard this on the Building Men podcast. Let's talk about what this means to me in my life. What do you think about it, mom, dad? Fill in the blank.
Yeah. 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 Do you watch porn? Ask your parents.
Right.
Do you watch porn? And as a parents, be honest. You know what I mean? Be honest with yourself first, because again, it can create a massive taboo. I think it's a taboo in most couples, actually, unfortunately.
Right.
Unfortunately. But I think it's the same thing with drugs, no? If you don't open the dialogue, what is weed, what is coke, what is whatever, what is drug, what's an addiction, you create a taboo. And teenagers, the way their brain is made, I don't know, I'm not a specialist, but the way my brain was made when I was a teenager is when I was seeing a closed door, I was like, I want to know what's behind that door. I want to open it. But when the door is open, my mom was very open, maybe too open, but there was no taboo at home. So at home, we were talking about sex, we were talking about violence, about drugs, about, there was no sort of closed doors. Maybe it's because she knew me and she know that if whatever's prohibited, it triggers my curiosity. You know what I mean? Maybe that's why I was in an open relationship as well. As you know, cheating doesn't really exist when you are in an open relationship. Like the door was there, but it's not like I was always having affairs and adventure, and I was changing diapers. I was going to
Right.
bed early. Also, it was just the nature of our relationship. But yeah. Opening the dialogue, and I think it's going to be very difficult for parents that are if the dialogue is not open between the parents, it's going to be very hard to open the dialogue with the children. I think there's something that needs to start there between the parents, and tackling this topic of conversation in bed. I think it's super important.
And it's a conversation to have with your significant other if that's the path that you're looking to go down in your life. If marriage is something that you're thinking about, don't put that in a little box and put it up on the shelf and say, I'll deal with it in the future, and be telling your significant other that, oh, you're the only one for me. I don't watch porn or whatever it is. And then secretly you're doing it. Herm Edwards talks about what is done in darkness will eventually come to light.
Come
So if
to
that's
light.
the thing that you're doing, that will come out in some way, shape, or form. You'll get sloppy, it'll come out in some way. So start having that conversation. So if that's something that you're doing, if you're watching porn on a regular basis and your wife is not into that, talk about it now, because otherwise you're going to be talking about it in 15 years and it'll be on the therapist's couch and she'll say, I can't trust you. You lied to me about this,
Yeah, yeah.
or I'm not desirable to you anymore. And then that's when the sex goes away in the marriage. There's a lot. So to have the conversations early and often in a relationship. And the way that you can do that as a parent right now, if you have your own kids, is start normalizing those conversations instead of we can't talk about it. Talk
Yeah.
about Pornhub is the fourth most visited website in the world on a regular basis. That's something. The average kid's first exposure to pornography is 12 years old. That's average. So half of them are before the age of 12, half of them are after the age of 12. That's the average. So if you have a kid who's in fourth, fifth grade right now, they're already thinking about it. Or there's that kid on the playground. I remember the kid who had the nudie magazine when I was growing up, and you're like, well,
Exactly.
how do I get a look at that? There's a kid that's talking to him about these things. So again, you want to have your moral compass be the thing that's guiding your kid, not little Billy on the playground.
Oh, that's for sure. And also, I think that there's different entry doors to sexuality, but I think porn is one of them.
Yes.
But there's other ways. For example, um, I've noticed my twins, one of them draw very, 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 very extremely well. She's into manga and she's really gifted for drawing. And I was in a manga shop in Barcelona. So I don't know if you know a bit about the world of manga, but there is different type of manga, and there's also manga for adults. And I remember she manifested the desire to buy, let's say, some spicier manga. Spicier, nothing, not hentai, hardcore, violent shit, but the story of a little girl that is discovering that she's lesbian, and whoops, she's having a little experience with another little girl, and things like that, right? And I remember at the beginning, my ex-wife was very resistant to this idea, until I took a moment with her and I was like, listen, do you prefer our girl to enter the world of sexuality through art and drawing, or do you want her to go online and tap big boobs, sex, enter, and let's see? And now her whole, the way she's gonna start fantasize having fantasy is belongs to Pornhub.com. So what I did is very simple: is when we were going to that manga place, I was just looking away. I was just looking away. I let her
Mm-hmm.
explore the thing and open the books and all that. And what's beautiful is now she's drawing things that, yeah, sometimes there's a little curve. You can see the little curve of a boob. You can see a little something. You can see there's a bit of sexuality, but you can see it's not vulgar. It's very healthy. She translated into art. Now I know at some point, or she probably already watched hardcore porn. I'm fairly sure, but I just want the parents to know that there is more than one door to enter sexuality, you know? And sometimes it's through movies, through TV shows, through drawing, through, well, music depends.
Right.
Depends. If your kid is into hip hop, maybe that's not the best entry, but um but I think also the ball game is very different when you have a little boy. I have two girls, they're twins, but I don't deal with a little boy, and I'm wondering, how do you deal with that with a little boy? Because porn is, for the most part, is produced for men. It's not
Mm-hmm.
produced for women, so it's very nice. It's very appealing to men, right? How do you deal with that with your son? That he's excited about the image, and you understand that because they're created for that, but at the same time there's a level of toxicity to
Yep.
it. And how do you talk about things like objectification to your child, when they didn't even make love? They don't know that yet. you know?
100%. And a couple things there. One, you mentioned music first, and then I'm going to weave it back into answering that question. But I remember growing up and hearing I Want Your Sex by George Michael. I remember hearing Me So Horny by Two Live Crew. I remember hearing Doing It by LL Cool J. There were those, Sir Mix-a-Lot, I Like Big Butts. Those were I remember being influenced by that and thinking, well, one, is this okay to listen to in front of my parents? So if we were driving somewhere and that song came on, I remember I got embarrassed because my parents are in the car and that song is coming on. Should I pretend that I don't like it? I remember that feeling. The other thing that you mentioned too, Mark, is the idea of the hardcore or the more violent graphic nature of it. And that's the thing that I think as parents we need to do is start talking to the kids about that piece of it. And you mentioned, I think it's brilliant to talk about stunt doubles and actors that are
Mm,
doing those things. I think that that's a good way for a kid to understand it's not, Tom Cruise that's jumping off of the helicopter, out of the helicopter. Like there's someone else that looks like him that's doing those kind of things. So I think that that's a brilliant way to do that. But the thing is, more than half of kids in their teenage years are viewing violent porn, which is the rape, the choking, someone getting beaten or in pain. And there's like a level of degradation that comes along with it.
mhm.
And there's that piece of it. There's the piece of it where the boys are watching. And when you think about females, one of the big reasons that Building Men was started was we had a female counselor in the school where I worked that did a girls group called Girls Speak Out, and she talked to the girls about body image and what they're seeing portrayed in magazines. And this is going back 20 years ago. It's before the how accessible the internet was. But they would talk about, if you're looking at Cosmo, everyone is absolutely perfect. Well, the same thing goes with boys, because if they watch porn, they're seeing, jack dudes, the guys have six
Yeah,
packs or whatever, and they're hung like horses, and the boys are like looking in the mirror like, wait, I don't look like that. So there's a level
yeah,
of shame and uncomfort that comes with, I don't look like that, but the only thing that I can do is I can act violently towards a girl. I can at least do that because it looks like that's what ultimately she's liking. So
yeah.
that's as a backdrop something that you need to be aware of as parents as well. For me, I would actually, when I started it, was sharing like a story of myself at my son's age, saying, I remember being your age and I came across, my parents, so his grandparents, they had porn. And like, I remember I played, hit play on the VCR that was at the time, this is in the late 1980s, early 1990s, that we had VCRs, and there was a sex scene that came on a VCR where there was a girl that was giving a guy oral sex. And I remember my heart started racing a mile a minute, and I got like flushed and I got like nervous, and I stopped it. And I was thinking, oh my God, I can't believe that my parents are watching this. And I felt like this level of like, ugh, like, I'm so
Wow.
ashamed of you for watching pornography. Like, how dare, like, that was what I thought about,
Ah,
right? But at the same time, I was super interested in it. But I couldn't have that conversation with my parents. They were not having that conversations with me. So once I saw that, I started to do my own research. And that was, trying to I went into their closet and I found more movies and I would watch them when they weren't at home. And so that was my indoctrination into that world, was by me sneaking around. So it had a level of deceptivity around it. So I was like being
yeah.
sneaky, like you mentioned, like that's behind the door. Let me go into that door. I shared that with my son. I talked to him about that's how I was introduced to it when I was in like sixth or seventh grade. And so there was always this level of um like a hidden thing about me that I was doing this. And while everyone in my friend group was likely doing something similar, I wouldn't talk about it because I felt ashamed about what I was doing. So
Huh.
for me telling my son that this is how I was indoctrinated into it, was this way, I was like, what I hope is that we have this conversation. So I want you to know how I was when I was your age, what I was going through in the world. Now it's way more accessible to you. Let's talk about what you have, what questions you have, and like here's some values that I want to share with you of my own that I would like for you to take a look at and think about how you feel about these values and these ethics.
Yeah.
And then if you have any questions or you disagree, like put it on the table and talk about it. But then I also realized I need to have the same conversations with my girls too, my daughters,
Mm,
because not only are they curious about it in their own way, like you mentioned, and girls or boys are different. Like the boys, it's much more visual in nature.
mhm.
I just think men's sexuality in general is a lot more based on, the what you're seeing. And I think, females, it's way more emotional. There's a way more emotional
Absolutely.
attachment. So, but having the conversations with the girls about, if you see this, this is not the norm, one. And then two, like, you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you feel like you have to do this to get another boy's affection or attention. Right. And so
Mm,
those were things that I do believe that the problem named is the problem solved. So if you talk about it, normalize having the conversations, then it's not something weird like, okay, here's your peas and carrots, and tonight we're going to talk about the birds and the bees. All
yeah.
of a sudden the kids get like, oh, are you kidding me,
Oh,
dad?
for
Like, this is
sure.
so embarrassing for everyone. Instead, normalize the conversation when you see two dudes holding hands walking down the street, or
Yeah.
something comes up in a movie that you're watching. Hey, I want to talk about when we just watched that show, this happened, what did you think about it? So it's less
Mm,
like this big ceremonial moment, and it's more
oh, for
just
sure.
part of conversation in life.
And I think I think one thing we need to reflect on is what is sexuality. I think that's the main question here. And for now, the way I define it to myself, maybe it's going to change. And the way I explain it to my children is sexuality is the celebration of a connection with yourself when you do it
Hmm.
alone, and a connection with someone else or more than one person. Who knows where your fantasy can bring you? But at the end of the day, it's the celebration of a connection. So I really like to say this because I was in an open relationship. So I was, I could, I had more than one woman in my life. I can say I never had bad sex. I had no sex because I had no connection with that person, you know. But I had okay sex, as I had good sex and very, very good sex where I connected better with the person. But I think to emphasize on the connection here is super important because, for example, one thing that a lot of girls might complain about with boys is boys are trying to reproduce the fantasies that they see in porn with a girl. But when you do that, you're not connecting with the girl.
Right.
You're just in your own fantasy, you're in your own head. So you're repassing all the best scene of porn that you've seen, those little things that you want to try, and you're trying to reproduce that using that other person that is in your bed at that moment. And this is a recipe for disaster. This is exactly where you're gonna get blocked on Instagram. You gonna she's not gonna text you back. It's not gonna work, you know? Uh I think it's important to have that conversation. What is sexuality? And to define it for yourself. Maybe we have different definition of it. But I think it starts from there because I'm gonna be provocative here, Dennis. But we cannot say that porn is bad because porn was created by us. All
Hmm.
right. So what you see in porn used to exist before porn as well. All right. I'm going to give a clear example. Sorry to be graphic. Let's talk about the whole cum shot uh, fantasy, the famous cum shot, right? The facial, the shit, the things like that. When you think about it, that's not something that was created by porn. Think about it 2 seconds. If the girl is giving you oral sex, maybe you're gonna come at some point, and I'm fairly sure in the middle age, uh, there was some cum shot something. You know what I mean? It's just that now we broadcast it, but we need to be careful with that because it's not that porn created all of those fantasies. Porn was just the gasoline on what was already inside us. The whole domination thing. That's not new. Read Marquis Sade, which is an erotic writer from I think it was the Renaissance, not the Middle Age, a little after the Middle Age. Hey, BDSM was already existing there. It was already there. It's just that now we have camera and we can broadcast it. So we need to be very careful because it's which one came first. Like, you know what I mean? We cannot get too much into the debate what's right and wrong. You know what I mean? Because the people agree to do that.
So when you say which one
It's
came first,
very
was that
tricky.
when you say which one came first, was that a Freudian slip, or did you mean to did you mean to say that? Was that a bit of a double entendre right there? When so a couple things
Was
there,
that?
and I agree. It's like pornography is not inherently bad. It's not good or bad. It is a thing, right? It is
Yeah,
anything. Just like anything else. It's the value that we put on it. But I
yeah.
think a lot of it is the intention that is associated with it, right? So
Mm,
when you talked about it, it's behind the closet door, and for me there was a level of shame that was associated with it as well. So when I think it's just being clear and honest. And you mentioned sexuality, like first thinking about how it impacts you yourself, and then how it impacts you with another human being. And then if you're a parent, how are you going to share that with your children? So I think it's around intent. So if you are, uh, going into incognito searches and going into the bathroom 3 times a day, and it's like you're hiding it, and then you're clearing your browsing history, and there's those things that are going on, and that's a part of it. Look in the mirror and say, okay, is this, how healthy is this then? So it's
yeah,
it's your intent, because I do know, and I, from my own experience, there was a time in my life where it was a hidden thing. It wasn't
yeah.
in my, I'm divorced now, but in my marriage, it was not a thing that was okay. And I was still doing it. I would still watch pornography, and it was done in a very secretive way. So my relationship with it was negative. It was a shameful one. It was one where I didn't have that emotional connection. I didn't have that, the marriage with intimacy. So that was my outlet, but it was done secretively. What I should have done was talked about, listen, there's not intimacy here. Let's like talk about what that means, because I'm having thoughts of watching pornography. I didn't do that. And it could have
Mm,
led to my divorce in a much, much earlier time frame as well, if that conversation happened. But that's the thing, is having that conversation. And you mentioned um the graphic nature and the things that are out there. I think now kids are able to see, like, wait a second, this is a thing. I had no, my imagination never would have gone in this direction, but these are things that are happening, and I could view it. And now I have a picture in my head of this thing that could potentially happen. And I don't even know, like, add in whatever like devious act in your mind that you could imagine. Now kids are seeing that done, and they have the script and they can rehearse it. Just like if I want to learn how to throw a curveball, I watch a picture of it, I do it, and I'm like, okay, I could keep practicing it. Now kids see the video of a guy doing this, that, or the other, and they're like, okay, I could remember what looks like before I'm actually
yeah.
involved in the act.
The thing is, I think what you're pointing out, it's easy to patch up what is lacking in your life with porn.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's easy. It's the easy way out, right? So you watch porn, you get excited, and after that, you think it's easy to reproduce as well. That's the thing, right? Okay, I'm going to give another graphic example. I'm sorry for your listeners, but um, anal sex is dirty, guys. It smells like shit. You have accident, you can get shit on. Like really, she can shit on you. It happened to me. You're full of shit. That's it. It doesn't happen like you see in porn. It's the reality of it is very different. You know, that if you want to explore anal sex, you need to be able to have that risk. It's not as going to be as clean and polished and beautiful as what you can see in porn. And whoop, it's you just chain a hole and that's it. It's easy. Yay! No, no, and it's not everybody that likes it. It's not. You know what I mean? So um, again, it's a question of education and also commitment to yourself because that's something I've learned from my open relationship. If you want to talk about it, you were interested to talk about it a little bit. And as it's linked to the
Yeah.
topic, us dive into it a little bit for the few minutes we have left, if you want. One thing that I've realized when you want an open relationship that works, you need to first create boundaries for yourself and your partner. All right. So what are the don'ts? What are the rules? You know, what is the thing that you don't accept? Like, can you have sex with a close friend? No, or I don't know. Do you only have? Do you can you sleep with my sister? Type of thing. Like maybe it's a don't. Right. You need to put some rules, some line that you don't cross. Okay, and you need to respect that. But after that, you need you as an individual to write down what you want to experiment and what you want to explore, because if you don't do it, it's not going to work. And now here's my challenging question. Most of men have the fantasies. I don't know, like there's many fantasies, but let's say your fantasy is to do a threesome with two chicks in a jacuzzi. Go find those two chicks that are willing to fuck in a jacuzzi. You'll see, man, it's not that easy. You know, it's not that easy to make this happen, to realize that fantasy. You need to put yourself in a context where you're not used to be put. You will need to maybe go in a swing club where you're going to find that extremely awkward. And, you know, it's going to be your first time is going to be so weird. It's talking to others and all that. Like it's so easy to stay inside your own bedroom and jerk off. That's the easy way out to patch up your life. But if you want to be in a like a whole an open relationship, that's the thing. You need to respect the boundaries, but also to respect your desires and your fantasies. And this is where it can get challenging, and this is where also porn can get in the way,
Yes.
because you realize there's a lot of fantasies that are created by porn. But as I said, with anal sex, yeah, it's beautiful when you watch it on porn, but when you do it yourself, it can it can be shitty, you know.
Right. Pun intended. I love that. So there's a couple things I want to touch on. First, I'll start there. And I mentioned before about young men's body image, right? And what they're seeing on a website, and then they look in the mirror and they're not seeing the same thing, and they feel a little bit of shame around it. The same thing goes with the acts that are happening. So on the video, and insert not just young men but men in general, right? They're seeing it on the video that there's this seamless transition from vaginal sex to anal sex, and everyone's having a great time, and it's lasting for an hour and 15 minutes. And the wind is blowing in the background, and then they do it themselves, and it's 1 minute, and there's feces everywhere, right? And then they're like, oh, and then they feel bad, like I wasn't able to do what I'm seeing on the
Yes.
TV, right? So there's that happens as well. The other thing is the level of, I mentioned the word shame that comes along with it. I did a podcast with a guy named Carl Thomas. This was back in February, I think it was February 8th of 2022, and the episode was called When Shame Gets Real. He wrote a book about being addicted to pornography, and he actually has an organization called the Triple X Church for guys
Oh wow.
recovering from porn addiction. And it can get to a place of where it is addictive in nature, especially, and I would ask, if you're habitually using pornography, what's the feeling associated with it as soon as you finish? Are you like, all right, I'm ready to go tackle the world, let's go, I'm so pumped up right now, I have this huge level of like endorphins that rush my body? Or do you look in the mirror and you're like, you are such a scumbag?
Yeah.
Ugh, that was me. I would be like, what is wrong with you? Like, you're a dad, like you're doing this, like, are you kidding me? So the connection as far as the act and then the emotional state being afterwards, it was this heightened sense of like, this is something I need to do. I needed to, have it was almost like an addictive thing where I felt like I needed it. And then as soon as it's done, I felt like an immediate, like an emotional well. It was like nothing in me. I was like, oh, I just didn't like myself. And then I went into this little bit of a despair, depressive state. And then the only thing that would get me out of it was like the next time that I would watch it.
Yeah.
And it was like I was in this never ending cycle. And for me, it needed to be cold turkey. Like, I'm done watching it. So this is going
Ah.
on 4 years right now that I have not watched pornography. And I'm just like, and it's the exact amount of time that I have been divorced, right? So it's like that,
Yeah.
those coincided. And for me, my relationship is way healthier now because of that. Because here's the other thing that I'm able to do, and this is something that I learned in my journey with Julie as well. And I was like, these are things that I am interested in. These are things that I like, that, that I get turned on by. I'm not afraid to say it. And if she's like,
Mm.
oh yeah, that sounds awesome, or she's like, yeah, that's not really for me. Okay, now I know, but then there's no longer shame associated with something that I'm feeling. I just talk about it, and she does the same thing. It's super healthy. But for a young man to have that conversation, like, here's what I'm turned on by, here's what I like,
Yeah.
here's the jacuzzi scene or whatever it is,
Yeah.
it's embarrassing to have those conversations. But if you're not ready to have those conversations, perhaps you're not ready to have that type of relationship with another human being.
That's for sure. And also, I think it's complicated as a teenager as well, because most of teenagers have a very low self-esteem already, you know? So I can totally see a little girl with a low self-esteem doing a favor for the boyfriend and do something that she doesn't want to do just to please him. You know what I mean? So when you manifest those fantasies, be ready to read between the lines when she answer. Is it
Absolutely.
truly what she feels, or she's saying it for you because she doesn't have the self-confidence to tell you, dude, this is fucked up. I don't want to do it. You know, that comes with time. And unfortunately, that's something I realized not too late, but later in my sexual life. Not when I was in my early 20s, where, when you're 20-year old, you just go explore, 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 explore. And I think it's okay, right? Until you sort of find the one, and then you explore with one person, and then you have different phase. But I think that's definitely a challenge that a lot of teenager must have. Teenage girl mostly. And also there's something else I want to talk about. One thing I've noticed with um, the few, I've realized it actually in the past years, man. I wasn't aware of it before, I think. But I started, like, the girls that I dated, towards, yeah, in the past year, started to realize that they had like some sort of pornographic behavior.
Hmm.
Things like in bed that you would see in porn, and no complaint, it's okay. But then I was asking them, like, do you watch porn? And they all told me no. And I know they're telling me the truth. I know they would tell me. They would have told me. It's not that there was a taboo or anything like that. So now I'm wondering, porn made his way inside her sexuality without even her watching porn. It's through her past experience with other men that she developed those behaviors. And now I'm talking about women that are my age, which is 40 years old. So I don't want to even imagine what the 20-year-old are experiencing right now, where they think it's the norm. We're still a generation where we know the world without internet. We have other
Right.
references, you know. But that must be a very different challenge at 20 than at 40.
And as you're talking about that, Mark, it's interesting. Like I'll start talking. I'll make this make sense in some way, shape, or form. But I'll use the analogy of, like, if there's a kid that's in the kitchen, right? Like a little toddler that's in the kitchen and walking around, you could be the parent that's like, no, 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 don't go by the stove, don't touch this, don't this. Or like if the kid goes by the stove and they go in the pot, boiling water's on there, and they touch it, like, holy shit, that's really hot, and they pull their finger back, and if I go here, I'm going to hit my head. And so they learn from their experiences of what works and what doesn't work. Insert, if the kids are training for athletics, this is how you field a ground ball, this is how you shoot a basketball, this works, this
Mhm.
doesn't work. And the more that they do it, the more that they learn, this is something that will help me find success, and this is something that's not good and I shouldn't do it this way. I would argue the same thing goes in this experience, right? So these women that you were speaking about, they're learning from, something that they did in bed with another human being. This was met with a level of like, I didn't really care for it. So they tried something different, and this worked well. Let me do this, and then do this a little bit more, and then they got a little bit more positive feedback, a little bit more positive feedback, to the point now that where they know this is something that a guy likes.
Yeah,
Based on their experience, the trials and errors, things like that. This is something that
yeah,
likes, and this is what works. So I'm going to go in this direction, which is interesting, and that because the men that they have been with likely watch some level of porn, so it could be they found out through their experience that
yeah,
it connected with what was being seen on camera as well.
yeah. And also that brings me, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's interesting what you say, because one thing that I realize that the people do is they dissociate sexuality from the human. Okay. So for example, when you start dating someone, you find you have a match on Tinder and you start chatting and blah 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 blah, and then you start chatting on WhatsApp because things get real serious, you know. And then everything goes well, a phone call, another phone call, couple of days pass, and then one night you have that little naughty conversation, right? And the girl asks, so what do you like? That's very common. People do that.
Hmm.
Like they get in, what do you like? I always answer the same thing. I don't know what I'm gonna like with you. I don't know. I cannot tell what I liked in the past with Samantha. Will that apply to you? I no. There's things I used to do with Samantha because my connection with Samantha was like this. You, it's gonna be something else. I never know what to answer to this thing. And I've been in swing clubs. I've done some extremely naughty things, my friend. Really, you know. It's not that I'm stuck up or things like that. It's truly to me, sexuality is the connection between two or more than two or one person. It's a connection. It's a connection, you know. So I can, when you really think about it, you can, I, I cannot dissociate the act from the person. You know what I mean?
Hear
Because
that?
we're
Yeah.
all different. We're
Yep.
all different. And what I want
And
to celebrate is my connection with the
that
person.
human being.
That's what I want to create.
And it's that uncomfortable conversation that you need to have, right? And in our 40s, it's easier to have that conversation. We've been through experiences in
Yeah.
our own lives, and we're also to the point now where we're like, all right, this is me. I'm not trying to put on a mask or be something I'm not. This in my experience, this is what I've enjoyed, but to your point with you, I've never had an experience, so how would I even know? But historically, these are things that I've liked. Like if
Yeah.
you're into feet, you're into feet, right? So if the woman has like
But
jacked
dude,
up
not
feet,
necessarily, man. Like for real, that's not true. I don't agree with you. Like, yeah, I know that there's those type of thing, but I don't like I used to like have a fetishes on that girl's legs. I never had a fetishes on any leg in my entire life. Like never happened. It was just my connection with that person. It was like that. But I never tried to reproduce this fetishist and start making it this thing that is real, that you know what I mean? Because if you say to yourself over and over that you like that, you're not expanding your sexuality. You're closing it. You're narrowing your sexuality to feet, you know?
and I agree the way that you're handling it is the healthy way. I disagree. I think that that's not the norm, though. I think you're less than 1% of the population who's able
No,
to have that
for sure,
conversation.
for sure.
What
Yes, for
happens
sure.
is the guys go onto Pornhub and they type in
Yes,
babysitter feet or something like that,
yes,
and that just becomes the rabbit hole, and
yes.
then they're getting this negative reinforcement by every single time that they go on to those sites.
Yeah,
That's what pops up, so they're getting that need fed more and
yeah,
more and more and more. And I just mentioned feet,
yeah.
like
No,
that's not
no, for sure.
a thing, like that's not my thing. But if people are into that, I do think that they'll gravitate more towards those type of situations,
For
or
sure.
they'll be at the beach just looking for girls with the feet. If they
Yeah.
see what was it, Boomerang with Eddie Murphy, where he needed the girl to have, it was like Robin Givens he was in the movie with. He was looking for the girl with the feet, and he found some girl. She was beautiful, but she had jacked up feet. She had like bunions and like blisters and stuff. He's like, nah, she's not for me. But but I appreciate us going down this road. I mean, we've been talking for a while right now. What I'd love to do is revisit this and have a part two down the road, and get a little bit deeper into it and
Yeah,
explore a little bit more into the open relationship piece, because I do think that would be intriguing to someone who's listening to this podcast. And not so
yeah,
much just like everyone wants to go and have that lifestyle, but I think what it does is it talks about the importance of healthy communication and not being afraid to share, this is me. Like, let me put it all out on the table. One of the character pillars that I talk about in building men when I meet with young men is authenticity. Like,
mm,
who are you? Like let's be open and honest about who we are and what we're interested in.
mhm,
And coincidentally enough, I think when I'm in a school for a full year, and it was such an amazing experience this year, Mark, being in several schools and seeing the growth and the development of young men in their middle and high school years over the course of a full year. And I'm so proud of these boys that I've had an opportunity to connect with. And I think one of the things that gets them initially, where at first, like, oh, why am I here? This is stupid. I got to sit in a circle with, 15 other kids. why. One thing I do is I'm super authentic and real with them. I just tell them my story, good, bad, and ugly. And I'm a big dude, 6'4", 220, and I shed a tear in front of the boys in the first meeting, and they're like, "Whoa." The second thing I do is I talk openly and honest with them about pornography. And when I first say porn with 14-year-old boys, you can see them all, their eyes dart around the room. They look all over the place and they're like, wait, did he just say this? And then there's this, they laugh and they snicker about it or whatever. But then the more that I normalize that conversation and talk about screen time and phone time, the more that they're willing to talk about it. And I remember there was one boy initially who's like, I feel like I got a little bit of a problem with this. And all the kids like turned and looked at him. And then finally, like another kid's like, yeah, me too. And then all of a sudden it was a normal
Wow.
conversation. And so what we did was we talked about, is this something that you want to continue doing? Because let's be honest about our intentions here. And then the one boy's like, I want to stop watching pornography. And he came up to me. This was, so now we're recording this in June. He talked to me in our May meeting and he said, I need to thank you. He said, the way that he said it was a little bit, graphic. He said, I was beating my meat 3 times a day. And he said, I was on my phone on average about 8 hours a day. And he said, I was beating my meat 3 times a day. And he said, I stopped. And he
Wow.
said, my life has gotten so much better. He said, I made the travel soccer team. He's like, I made the honor roll in school because like these things, my relationships with my peers and my family has gotten way better. I've been outside more because I was able to identify that this was an issue. But he also said, you normalize, it's okay if you're dealing with this. Like, I'm not gonna, like, how I felt shame. He's like, I didn't feel ashamed. He's like, I just recognized this is something that I want to get a hold of. I don't want to go down this path. So those were a couple cool things that happened, but the level of authenticity needed in a relationship to be able to have those conversations, that's paramount. That's really one of the big things. I wanted to also just give credit where I got the stats from. There is an article called Pornography Use Among Young Adults in the United States. The authors are Sam Smith Nelson and Jamie Lesueur. So just wanted to, that's where I got the information from. That's
Cool.
not my research. I did it. That was the article that I found.
The link is gonna be below in the show notes
Awesome.
for anyone to
So
read.
so Mark, we'll continue. We'll do a couple more episodes over the course of the next couple months. I always enjoy conversations with you.
Yeah.
Just your level of it's always fun. We always laugh, but it's super engaging, and then also like it's giving me an idea of a little bit of another slice of life. Like, and your comfort in talking about your experiences. I think it's absolutely tremendous, and thank you for the way that you are raising your daughters in that way where you're hey, thank you for coming to me with that question. I really appreciate it. That like
It
that's
starts
helping
from
me.
there.
Absolutely. 100%.
It starts from there because and it goes it extends to a bunch of things, right? But if you don't open up to your children won't open up to you, you know. So if you don't congratulate them when they come to you with something like that,
Right.
the child is not gonna come back, and you don't want to lose them that early. You're gonna lose them no matter what. When they hit the road and they go in apartments and they don't, you're gonna lose them at some point. Losing,
Right.
you know, quote unquote losing. But yeah, communication is the key of it to everything. And communication start with a good communication with yourself
Agreed.
first.
Absolutely.
Transparency with your own self first, and that's the tricky part.
So where can the audience find you? How do we get in touch with you?
They can. I'm gonna be in the show notes. If not, podcastproducer.com. All my links will be there.
Appreciate it. Building Men audience, if you're listening to this episode, if you got any level of value from it, consider liking it, leaving a review, and more than anything, sharing it with other people that you think might have gotten some value from this conversation. Marc Picard, appreciate you, my man.
Thank you.
Building Men audience, go one step further than you thought you could go. We will see you next time on Building Men.